We had some technical things we need to correct. So now that we're all connected, yeah, please share with us your role as a volunteer for the county committee or commission you're involved with.
Well, thank you very much, sir. I am your County Tax Assessor Appeals Board Director, and I know you love me, and it's a beautiful Monday night.
Absolutely. We love your participation too, Wendy. Thank you for being a regular attendee at these things. So appreciate that part of it as well.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, anybody else? I don't have my laptop, so I can't tell. Is there anybody else who's a volunteer?
No.
Okay, all right. Very good. So we've completed item 1. So we'll move to item 2, adoption.
No, I have had no sound.
He's not on District 1. Yeah. So, okay. So adoption of the regular meeting agenda. Is anyone on the leadership team who has any proposed changes to the agenda? All right. Seeing none, we'll go ahead and accept that as submitted. Item 3, public comment. So this is the segment of the meeting that we would encourage anyone from the public who would like to make a comment of an item that's not on tonight's agenda is welcome to do so. We do have the microphones distributed around. Then we also have a microphone. We did. I guess it's not there tonight. Okay, so we have microphones in the room, but we would ask you to use a microphone if you're not participating via Zoom, if you have a question or a comment so the public can hear you. So anyone is welcome to come forward at this time. Or to grab a microphone. Not seeing anyone in the room. Do we have any hands raised?
No.
Okay, all right. So we have no public comment. So we'll move on to item 4, which is our guest speaker. And it is my pleasure to introduce Jeff Warren this evening. He's our director of El Dorado County's environmental management team. And he's going to share with us the implementation of new state legislation called SB 1383. And I'm sure that's the reason Don is here as well, because Don is very involved in our volunteer committee, monitoring all those things. So on a regular basis. So, but the subject is really organic waste collection, composting, collection of reusable foods and all those kinds of things. And so I know that Jeff has a presentation. Do we have that ready to pull up?
Yes, I can share my screen at any time.
Okay, please, Jeff, if you would share your screen. Anything else you'd like to provide as self-introduction, please feel free to add any information, relative to your background, anything you think would be appropriate to share at this point.
Sure, thank you very much. My name is Jeff Warren. I've been the director for environmental management here since end of July. I've been with the county for just a little bit over 5 years. Prior to me coming to the county, I also worked for the County of Orange Environmental Health, and I had over 20 years experience in the retail food inspection and supervising those programs down there. So I've been working really close with our field staff, with our solid waste on implementing SB 1383. It is very dynamic. There's a lot of people don't like it, but it's a new law. But I'm going to go over and try to give you like a high-level overview of why it was implemented, why the state passed it, and what the county's responsibility is for this. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay. Okay. And as we always like to start up Zoom meetings, can everybody see the slideshow?
Good job.
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, good. Okay, like I mentioned, this evening, I'm going to give you an overview of SB 1383 in respects to what the county is responsible to implement. And first of all, I'll start with a background information introduction on this new law. SB 1383 is the most significant waste reduction mandate to be adopted in California in the last 30 years. SB 1383 requires the state to reduce organic waste disposal by 75% by 2025. In other words, the state must reduce organic waste disposal by more than 20 million tons annually by 2025. The law also requires that 20% of current disposed edible food be recovered for human consumption by 2025. This has significant policy and legal implications for the state and local governments. First, SB 1383 establishes a statewide target, and it's not a jurisdictional organic waste recycling target. Given that it's a statewide target, and it's not a jurisdictional target, the regulation requires a more robust approach. As mentioned, the overview of the presentation, we're going to have a little background and context of why California passed the law, the requirements, the big picture to look at the law's requirements and objectives, and lastly, what the jurisdiction responsibilities are of local governments. When we were talking about organic waste for the purpose of 1383, we're talking about materials such as green waste, wood waste, food waste, and also fibers such as paper and cardboard. Organic waste comprises over half of our waste stream. According to CalRecycle's waste characterization study in 2018, food waste comprised 13% of what we disposed. 1383 requires California to recover 20% of currently disposed edible food for human consumption. Now, we don't currently know how much of the food waste stream is donatable, but CalRecycle has conducted a waste characterization study in 2018 and 19 that took a closer look at the food waste stream. And with the results of the study will help determine how much edible food waste is landfilled on an average throughout the state. But here's what we do know. 1 in 5 children go hungry every night in California. So redirecting perfectly edible food that's currently being disposed of to feed those in need can help alleviate this. For every 2.5 tons of food rescued, that's equivalent of taking 1 car off the road for a year. And recovering 1 ton of edible food could provide up to more than 1,600 meals for hungry people. So landfilling organic waste leads to anaerobic breakdown of that material, which creates methane. Landfills are responsible for about 21% of the state's methane emissions. Landfills are also the 3rd largest producer of methane in the state. Methane is 84 times more potent than carbon dioxide over a 20-year horizon. Now, climate change may seem like a distant problem, but there are more environmental impacts associated with landfill disposal of organic waste that might immediately have negative impacts on our community right now. Landfill and organic waste is a significant source of local air quality pollutants. These pollutants have an immediate negative impact on the air in our community, and it can cause respiratory issues and hospitalizations. Diverting organic waste to recycling can significantly reduce these local air quality emissions and associated negative impacts. We're starting to see the effects of climate change in cities and counties throughout California. Longer droughts and warmer temperatures are drying out the forest and contributing to ever increasing number of wildfires in California, which also impacts air quality. Cyclical droughts, bigger storms, coastal erosion due to rising sea levels. We should not underestimate the cost of these climate change impacts. The state and communities are spending billions fighting wildfires, removing debris and rebuilding homes. And this is something that the county is experiencing firsthand with the Caldor fire. So this means we are paying for the effects of climate change today. The financial and public health impacts are already here, and we need to take action to mitigate the climate change now. And that is why the state enacted SB 1383, which is designed to reduce the global warming gases like methane, which are the most potent and are short-lived. 1383 is a fast track to fighting climate change, and by reducing this gas now through actions like organic waste recycling will significantly reduce emissions and will reduce the impacts of climate change in a lifetime. So an overview again of 1383, it establishes aggressive organic waste reduction targets. It also builds upon the mandatory commercial organics recycling law, AB 1826, which we have been implementing since 2016. 1383 requires Californians to reduce organic waste disposal by 50% by 2020 and 75% by 2025. These targets use CalRecycle's 2014 waste characterization study measurements when 23 million tons of organic waste were disposed of. These disposal reductions will reduce at least 4 million metric tons of greenhouse gas emissions annually by 2030. Additionally, as part of the disposal reduction targets, the legislature directed CalRecycle to increase edible food recovery by 20% by 2025. And their food recovery goal is unique in this case. So highlighted here on this slide are the key dates for SB 1383, implementations and milestones. CalRecycle conducted 2 years of informal hearings with local governments and stakeholders. CalRecycle began the formal regulation rulemaking on January 2019. It collaborated with jurisdictions and other stakeholders for over 4 years to complete the regulations. The Office of Administrative Law approved the regulations on November 2020. And regulations took effect January 1st of this year, and jurisdictions were to have their programs in place. However, in 2021, last year, the governor signed into law SB 619, which gives relief to jurisdictions from being in violation for not having all the components in place. Many jurisdictions have been affected by the pandemic, and it has slowed the process of program implementation and development. In 2024, jurisdictions will be required to take enforcement action on non-compliant entities. CalRecycle expects that jurisdictions will be planning and making programmatic and budgetary decisions regarding the requirements in advance of the deadlines. CalRecycle can begin enforcement actions on jurisdictions and other entities starting this year, January 1st. But as mentioned, as long as the jurisdictions have a notice of intent to comply by March 1st, there'll be no enforcement actions. CalRecycle has some funding through competitive grant programs as well as a loan program for establishing the infrastructure for recycling organic waste and recovering edible food. However, for the programmatic activities such as inspections, enforcement, education, collection, we will need to plan for budgetary changes to address these. And CalRecycle has published a number of tools that we can begin utilizing, such as a model enforcement ordinance, franchise agreements models, and educational materials. And using the 2018 and 2020 statewide waste characterization, jurisdictions will be required to adequately resource the following programs. First one is to provide mandatory organic waste curbside collection services to all residents and businesses. Now, this means all organic waste, including green waste, wood waste, food waste, manure, fibers, etc. Containers have been prescribed colors. There are container labeling and contamination monitoring requirements. And we need to assess our current collection programs and determine what may need to be expanded or changed. Number two is to establish an edible food recovery program for all commercial edible food generators. Now, this means ensuring that there's edible food recovery organizations that have enough capacity. This may entail providing funding to ensure that there's adequate capacity in collection services. Number three, to conduct education and outreach to all generators. This will require education to be provided in all generators and, if necessary, in alternate languages. Number four, our jurisdiction would be required to procure certain levels of compost, renewable gas used for transportation fuels, electricity, heating applications, or electricity from biomass conversion produced from organic waste. Also, we'll need to purchase recycled content paper and paper products. Number five is to plan and secure access for recycling and edible food recovery capacity. And six, we'll be required to monitor compliance and conduct enforcement. And as mentioned, the monitoring and education begins this year, and enforcement actions began January 1st, 2024. And lastly, we'll need to adopt an ordinance with enforceable mechanisms that's consistent with these regulatory requirements. And we're planning to have our ordinance adopted and in place by April 1st. So this law extends beyond directing waste management and recycling operations and staff. And listed here are several sections of government that are entangled with this, but each department listed will need to know and understand how SB 1383 works. Record keeping and reporting requirements extend all of these departments, and jurisdictional leaders will play a vital role in ensuring compliance with 1383. City councils and boards of supervisors will need to pass local enforcement ordinances to require all residents and businesses to subscribe to these services. City managers and chief administrative officers will be involved in capacity planning, directing procurement of recycled organic products like compost and renewable natural gas, and establishing edible food recovery programs. Finance and legal staff will be involved in local enforcement ordinances, new collection fees, and ensuring programs are adequately resourced. Purchasing staff will be central to procuring recycled organic products and recycled content paper. And procuring doesn't mean necessarily the purchase of this, but this department is likely to be aware of the current compost, mulch, renewable natural gas, and paper product purchases for the jurisdiction. Staff in my department will be involved in revising franchise hauler agreements, local waste management, processing facilities, and organic waste recycling facilities. They may also be involved in civil engineering activities where compost may be utilized, such as erosion control along city streets and embankments. Public parks staff may be involved with assessing the need for local compost application to parks and landscape areas. Environmental health staff may be tasked with enforcing duties, including inspecting commercial food generators for compliance with edible food recovery requirements. And lastly, public transportation and fleet departments could be involved in procuring renewable gas for city or county-owned vehicles. The most basic element of the regulation is that jurisdictions are required to provide a mandatory organic waste curbside collection service to each of the residents and businesses throughout the franchise haulers. The regulations also require residents and businesses to use organic waste recycling services that meet regulatory requirements. Jurisdictions must have enforceable requirements on its haulers that collect organic waste in the jurisdiction, and also for commercial and residential generators and self-haulers. In general, there's a lot of detail regarding the types of allowable collection programs, and these are the high-level requirements. Each resident and business must subscribe to an organic waste collection service that either source separates the waste, such as separate bins, or transports all unsegregated waste to a facility that recovers 75% of organic content collected from the system. The regulations allow for a menu of collection options. From the graphic here, services can range from a 1-can system, a 2-can system, or a 3-can system. The 3-can option allows additional separation at the hauler generator's discretion. For example, some jurisdictions may provide a separate container for yard waste and food waste, such as a green can or a brown can, so it can easily be managed and separated. The same rules will apply to entities not subject to local control, and CalRecycle will oversee state agencies, universities, and community colleges, and the K through 12 schools and other entities not subject to local oversight. 1383 requires that we strengthen our existing infrastructure for edible food recovery and distribution. Jurisdictions are responsible to implement edible food recovery programs in their communities. Now, this includes assessing capacity of existing food recovery, establishing food recovery program, and expanding existing infrastructure if necessary, inspecting commercial generators for compliance, and conducting education outreach. Even in communities where existing infrastructure already exists, there are new record keeping and inspection tasks that need to be implemented. Getting a head start on the implementation process by assessing this infrastructure that currently exists within the community is important. We need to assess the following. How many commercial edible food generators do we have? How much edible food can they donate? How many food recovery organizations exist, and what's their capacity to receive this available food? What gaps do we have in our current infrastructure, and what do we need to close them? And how can we fund, Get back to my slide there, sorry about that. So getting a head start, and how can we fund the expansion of the edible food recovery grants, such as our organizations, such as grants, partnerships, or sponsorships? And what partnerships currently exist, and what new partnerships need to be established? So the inspection enforcement requirements. Starting this year, jurisdictions are required to have an enforcement mechanism or ordinance in place. We are not required to enforce until 2024. So between today and December 2023, we need to get to identify regulated entities in violation and provide them with educational material. Now, the focus during this first 2 years is educating the generators, with the goal of ensuring every generator has the opportunity to comply before mandatory jurisdiction enforcement comes into effect in 2024. After 2024, January, jurisdictions must take progressive enforcement against the organic waste generators that are not in compliance. The progressive approach allows for notification to the generator and provides time for the generator to comply before penalties are required to be issued by the jurisdiction. And when a jurisdiction determines a violation occurred, the jurisdiction is required to, at a minimum, issue a notice of violation within 60 days of determining it's a violation. And if the generator still doesn't comply within 150 days of that issue of a notice of violation, then we're responsible to issue penalties. Regulations allow a generator to be out of compliance for only a total of 210 days before penalties must be issued. Regulations are set a minimum penalty for an amount of at least $50 for the first offense within 1 year, and can go up to $500 a day for multiple offenses. And this is why that early, robust education program is key, and hopefully it'll minimize the amount of future enforcement actions needed. So if a jurisdiction is using a 3 or 2-bin organic waste collection service, they're required to do the following. We have an annual compliance review of commercial businesses, just as we are doing now with AB 1826, the mandatory commercial organic recycling. Commercial businesses, which includes multifamily dwellings of 5 units or more that generate 2 cubic yards or more a week of solid waste, such as trash, recycling, organics. This is a desk audit to verify that service is provided or that they are complying through self-hauling or backhauling. Route reviews, we are supposed to conduct route reviews of commercial businesses and residential areas. The route reviews could check randomly selected containers and must be done on all collection routes annually. It's a visual inspection only, and bags will not be opened. And education is provided if there's an issue. The jurisdiction has the option of conducting waste evaluations every 6 months to identify if there's any prohibited container contaminants. If there's more than 25% prohibited container contaminants, then the additional education must be provided. There's numerous activities that can be delegated to our haulers, such as the route reviews. For single unsegregated collection service, we'll need to verify with the haulers that the contents are transported to a high diversion organic waste processing facility and that the facility is meeting the requirements of the organic content recovery rate. And there's no route reviews required. The jurisdiction requirements, the county will have to maintain all information in an implementation record. This graphic is a snapshot of the items to be kept in the implementation record. Each section requires a minimum level of record keeping, such as ordinances and contracts and franchise agreements. CalRecycle reviews the implementation record as part of the compliance evaluation of our program. The implementation record needs to be stored in one central location. It can be kept as a physical copy or electronic record. It needs to be accessible to CalRecycle staff within 10 business days and retained for 5 years. So how will the state enforce SB 1383? CalRecycle will be overseeing and monitoring jurisdictions, state agencies, facilities, and local educational agencies' compliance. These efforts can include everything verifying that organic waste generators have service, jurisdictions for providing education, and that notices of violation are issued with the correct time frame. SB 1383 is a statewide target and not a jurisdictional organic waste diversion target. The regulations establish state minimum standards, and the jurisdictions and the regulated community have to demonstrate compliance with each of the standards. If the regulations under SB 1383 regulations, if CalRecycle determines that a jurisdiction is violating one or more of the requirements, the jurisdiction, meaning the county, will be issued a notice of violation and be provided up to 90 days to correct the violation. For cases where the jurisdiction may need additional time, CalRecycle may provide an extension for up to 90 days. For violations that are due to barriers outside of the jurisdiction's control and may take more time to correct, the regulations allow for the jurisdiction to be placed on a corrective action plan that can allow up to 24 months to comply. In these cases, the jurisdiction needs to show it's taken substantial effort to comply, but cannot due to extenuating circumstances. A cap issued to inadequate organic waste recovery capacity may be extended for a period of 12 months if the jurisdiction meets the requirements and has demonstrated substantial effort to CalRecycle. And finally, failure to effectively implement SB 1383 could also result in penalties of up to $10,000 per day. And with that, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to give an overview of the county's responsibility in implementing SB 1383. And I understand that El Dorado Disposal and the other franchise haulers will be coming to the Board of Supervisors supposedly next month to give their presentation on what it means for the individuals and the residents as far as what the roles are for us as residents and our waste. And at that point, I believe they'll be coming back to your meetings to actually open it up for more questions and comments.
Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate the summary presentation. And boy, this is a big effort. Obviously, there's a lot of breadth and depth to this subject. So with that, I'll ask any of the leadership team if you have any questions or comments for Jeff at this point. So John Davey.
Hey, thanks, Jeff, for sharing that all with us tonight. I did have a question about the franchise waste haulers in the county. I understand, the incorporated cities have their own, agreements, but how many different franchise waste haulers are there in El Dorado County?
We have El Dorado. No, we have El Dorado Disposal and South Tahoe Refuse.
Okay, so I didn't. Okay, and so do they have a guideline from the county on how the county would like to see it implemented, or is that waiting for that presentation to the Board of Supervisors?
We've been part of the intent to comply with 1383 is that we have a close relationship with our haulers and we work with them to help implement their pilot programs. It's just going to be a separate presentation from their standpoint of what their pilot program will be designed after, and kind of go from there. But it's going to be most likely your green waste bin with your yard waste will be mixed with the organics and and it will be required to be picked up on a weekly basis. And they can't get a waiver for it to be on a bi-weekly basis. So along with that, we've also got all of our waivers in for exemptions for the high elevations, and we're continuing to work with Cal Recycle on some of the shapefile issues they had that could also, with population, can also give out some exemptions for organic recycling.
Yeah, I was kind of curious about how, each of those franchises are awarded. Like for us, it's primarily El Dorado Hills Community Services District manages that franchise agreement here. But I was thinking of different places in the county where they have issues with bears that we don't, and they have those lock boxes, and with more food out, if anyone envisions that being an additional problem. But yeah, so it's a big effort to get our hands and our heads around.
Right, and that's where the high elevations with South Tahoe Refuse, because they're mandated to have bear boxes, and so it's more of a manual process where the guys are in the back of the truck and have to actually get out, open up the boxes, and get the cans out. It's not the big arm that comes out.
Yeah.
So in those high elevations and areas that are very hard, difficult to get to, they end up getting exemptions from this, so they can keep doing what they're doing, or you can still self-compost at home. But yes, those are all issues that are no pun intended, but come to bear that we all have to come up to.
Thank you.
Any other? Yeah, John, Mania.
Hey, Jeff, thanks for the presentation. And I know you're kind of the messenger, so I know you're going to get a lot of blowback, I'm sure.
Thank you for recognizing that. I'm just the messenger. Don't shoot me.
I wouldn't want your job, but
I'm here from the government. I'm here to help.
Yeah, right. So I currently, and I won't identify my address, but I currently don't get a green waste can. I burn my green waste and stuff for my tree trimming and stuff like that. But so along those lines, because I can legally do that, is there going to be an option provided for people who compost at home, that they would not have to get an extra trash can they have to, have around the property? Is that going to be something, that's just something that you might want to consider for people who compost, most of their stuff. So I didn't know if you had any thoughts on that.
That's something that would probably be, along with El Dorado Disposal, be one of theirs to what they have to implement. And so that's what we would be working with them on, to see if Cal Recycle would have those allowances, would say, because I know the same thing. My neighbor doesn't have a green waste bin and he loves to burn. We try to compost as much as we can, but it's just one of those things that if it's, service is not going to be mandated, that people can actually opt out of the service, but then you'll still be stuck with the self-hauling portion of the requirements. So that's one of the questions that we still have to work with El Dorado Disposal and see what the plan would be in that such situation.
Okay, great. All right. Thank you much. Appreciate it.
Sure.
Else, Richard.
Yeah. Unfortunately, when there's only a messenger, that's usually who gets shot.
That's why I'm doing it virtually here.
Yes, very smart. So it shows some brilliance on your part.
Yes.
First, has anybody put a general overall price tag on this particular piece of legislation?
We could talk about price and talk about how much, trying to get by in doing it, or if you wanted to do it completely correct. I talked to staff about it. They've mentioned that if you really want to do it right, we could be looking at a $400 a month bill for having all of the waste diverted properly and taken care of properly. Obviously, that's not going to happen. This is probably one of the most unpopular laws that have gone into effect of the component of how hard it's going to be to implement. And again, it's a statewide target, and it's not going to be individually, sought on. Like El Dorado County, it's not going to be picked on. They'll look at our numbers, but it's the state overall. And there's other larger counties that are giving a lot of pushback to Cal Recycle on the implementation. So, we're just going through what we have to do with our notice of intent to comply. We're going to have we have our template for our ordinance. So we're going to get that in place. And, you know, the hard part is going to be compliance and how do you do that component of it? And that's been the big question that we have a talk with Dorado Disposal, and it's a very good question. You know, there's talk about having environmental health staff in our department to go out there and survey the route and go open up trash cans. But we can delegate that to the trash haulers. But again, they're not going to be opening up bags to see, did you contaminate the load? So these are all components that are going to be very difficult to implement and enforce. And, you know, we're working together as a team to see what's the best foot we can go forward with. And then, you know, basically, if we take our lumps with Cal Recycle, we take our lumps, but, you know, we'll get by. But that's what the larger counties are doing. They're putting up the good fight for us.
In the introduction, there were a lot of large numbers in terms of metric tons of edible or non-edible, etc. And I'm always suspicious of numbers that represent gross statistics on commodities that are so widely dispersed relative to their initial creativity, be it either edible waste or biodegradable material. And, you know, all these numbers suggest a major focus or project, but I'm very skeptical of the ability to come up with those kind of numbers. I think it's part of the sales pitch. I think we all say that getting rid of environmental contamination, such as methane gas, is a good thing, but I'm not so sure whether we've got the, are we dealing with this at the byproduct end, or should we be dealing with it at the front end and creating less and less that will be waste? I think at the source might be better than at the tail end. Listening, there's a lot of requirements that have no, I think, consideration as to what it's going to cost to put a new container out, to produce that up front, and the methodology of collection. I compost. I know the things I can't compost. And frankly, I can put that in a real small shoebox for a whole month. So I see this big infrastructure, and as far as my contribution to it, I see it as pretty minimal. Also, I think my yard waste is only collected every 2 weeks. So if I put the inedible, non-compostable in there, it's going to sit in there and basically attract vermin and everything else for a period of time. I just see some real high-level goals that have not really respected the ground level ability. I'm also a recycler, and I go to the recycle center, and I see the difficulty that El Dorado Disposal has in managing what is probably the most observable end of waste, the plastic bottles, the aluminum cans, and the glass bottles. And the incentive of doing that has been greatly reduced because the weight per pound of some of those has been reduced as to what they're paying out. And if you go to our disposal recycle center down on Latrobe Road, you'll see that the difficulty they're having to deal with electronic waste, which is just stacking up and stacking up. And disposing of that is becoming even a greater and greater problem. So I think we have piled some things on the good side of ideas, but we're not really practical about how we can best address these things. I just see a significant cost being levied on top of the county with a very challenging circumstance that our private companies who collect waste and recycle already are having a huge challenge in complying with these state laws. So I just see a lot of immediate headaches that is really going to undermine the good intention of this program. My 2 cents.
Okay, well stated. Anyone else? So I have one comment, Jeff, and this is yet another unfunded mandate from the state of California down to the counties and cities. And we all know it's going to cost the individual resident, property taxpayer, whatever it is, monies in the end to implement it. And that is absolutely, I think, unconscionable that the state continues to flow these things down to us and we're supposed to pick up the cost, even though a lot of the rules and regulations don't make a lot of sense for rural counties. They might be applicable in very highly populated metropolitan areas or something like that, but we always seem to get left out of the consideration of what happens in rural counties. And it gets into things like the restriction of the use of gasoline or propane powered generators beyond 2028. In fact, you can't buy a new one in California the way the current legislation is set up, which doesn't at all address the emergency situation that happens in high altitude rural locations, let alone flooding and PSPS. And so there's a whole number of things, but it's just another one of those things that adds to our cost of government. And ultimately, it's got to be paid for. And typically, this is going to be a ratepayer thing. But the county staff time is also going to be something that has to be accommodated. We're not going to try to pass that on to the ratepayers. That's going to be a county cost. So from our general funds, which are primarily property tax, we're going to have to establish a larger percentage of those funds to go to environmental management and other organizations, as Jeff identified, to make sure the services are available to be as compliant as we reasonably can be with this legislation. So you get to a point of diminishing returns. How many more of these can we accept before the real services that the local residents want can't be delivered? And that's kind of what's happening. It's a watering down of services. So you got to go back, because I want to let everybody else talk too. So go ahead.
Yeah, just one other thing I'd forgotten, Jeff, is so the food recovery aspect, that's going to be limited to commercial vendors. It's so anything I put in the garbage and stuff or the recycle thing's not going to end up in my cereal box, right? So this is just the commercial.
That's correct.
So,
Your cereal box? Okay.
yeah, well, you know, just had to ask.
Not unless
Yes.
you're a cow.
So
Yeah, this
well,
that
you know, these preservatives, you know, that they put in there.
yeah,
Go
that
ahead,
that
Jeff.
component is going to be that's a program that I've been involved in when I was in Orange County for Waste Not OC, which this is the edible, wholesome food at restaurants that goes unused. So it's not spoiled, but it's you know, to give an example, like you had a catering operation that produced, you know, 300 meals for one night, but then they canceled and they only had to use 200. So now they got 100 meals prepared in their kitchen. So instead of throwing that in the trash, they can donate that to a nonprofit, a food bank, and there's mechanisms in place for food safety that they, you know, a driver would have to be done that has to have basic food safety knowledge and a certificate to actually transport that food and go to the food bank for proper handling and storage and distribution. And we actually started a pilot program about 2 to 3 years ago with the food bank of Dorado County with CalRecycle grants. And they got infrastructure, but in part of that, we started a program that we were wanting to start in El Dorado Hills, but then when the pandemic hit and then the fire hit, our resources were kind of diverted. But it was going to model the same thing where environmental health staff, the inspectors, are going to a restaurant and educating the operators on donating wholesome food that would go to waste in their kitchen, or it's coming up an expiration date, or it's and then they can donate that, and it diverts it from the landfill and it goes to, you know, a source where we can help feed people. And
Well, I
that's
think
that
a good
component.
thing. Yeah, because
And
years
it-
ago at our church, you know, there was a period of time where we could get stuff from the local supermarket as part of our food closet, but then they shut it all down based on health restrictions. And so I'm glad to see that's going to be loosened up some more and everything. So
Right, and the legislation's been put in place over the years for the Good Samaritan Food Donation Act, so that it does not, if you're a supermarket or a restaurant, you cannot be held liable for any type of claim of food poisoning or spoiled food or, you know, illnesses against it. So it's just that puts that in place, and that's the hard part of, you know, as a regulator going into a restaurant and saying, you know, here's an opportunity for you to get rid of your food, and they're like, well, I kind of have to now because you're the regulator. So it's a fine line we have to take, we leave it very broad and general to say, here's the law in general, here's the intent. And we got several food banks in the area, nonprofits and churches that can actually take it. And so that's the message that will be continued on, and it's going to be a component of what we have to do for 1383.
Thank you, Jeff.
So members present in the conference room here, anybody have any questions or comments for Jeff at this point? Don, I know you got a lot of answers, but go ahead. All right, so let's keep it limited, though, because I know you're very much in the trenches on this. So go ahead. Yeah, we need to get your microphone. I'm not sure what's out there. So. Because for years, I'll just say that the effort that's gone into solid waste reduction is diversion. And so we've tried to track all those numbers and determine what the waste we're getting out of our landfills and actually getting into recycling. And the last time I got a check on that, we weren't meeting those goals either. And that's a very difficult undertaking. So this is just one more thing that's laid over the burdensome act of trying to deal with our waste, how to properly get it in the right waste streams. It's not easy. So Don.
Okay, I'll keep it pretty simple. I had 4 questions that I had written before I came here because I figured at this length of time where we've been working on this program that this would be an appropriate time to ask those 4 questions.
Okay.
Because this program, I mean, the regulations from the state were finalized in 2016, so we knew it was coming, right? And then the regulations were finally finalized at the end of 2020. That's the who shall do when, by what time, and what have you. So we're pretty far into this thing. And my first observation was that we still seem to be speaking an awful lot in the future tense at this point, since these things became effective on January 1st of 2020. And what we heard at the 2 weeks ago at our solid waste management committee meeting was that the county is going to be bringing to the board, I think it was in April, the ordinance that describes this program. So it seems like the program should be pretty much in place of what we want to implement if we're going to be bringing an ordinance to the county in 2 months. As far as the diversion goes, just to kind of put it into perspective, it's been 10 years now since we've implemented our solid waste management plan, which cost us about $250,000 to implement. And we came up with 46 strategies, and about 28 or 30 of them we've kind of implemented one way or another. So when we started 10 years ago, we were at a diversion rate of 69%. And now 10 years later, we're at a diversion rate of 60%. After all the effort and time and money that we've spent on it. So my questions that were for today was just kind of based on the way the solid waste management plan was written. It put a very good methodology, the way the plan was written, how all the evaluations were done, and left a template for how we can go ahead in our planning process for our various projects going forward. So the 4 questions that I just wanted to ask, and I'll just ask them all together, and then you can respond to them, because some of them may overlap and you may be able to cover a couple of them at the same time. One of them is, what is the increased diversion that you expect to achieve through implementation of this new organics recycling program? That's the first question. The second question is, how much do you expect the development and implementation of the program to cost? Kind of following up with you. What is the efficiency for implementing the new program? By that I mean, what is the expected cost per ton expected to be diverted? And then the fourth one is, what is the proposed rate increase that is being considered probably at the next rate review, which would probably be in July? And just for comparison, 2 that I'm familiar with, Citrus Heights, they had their rate hearing bringing forward to the public their costs for implementing their new program to 1383. And they're proposing $7.76 a month to implement just that organics portion. And Sac City, they had their rate hearing in November of last year. And they're proposing $7.30 a month paid over 3 years, so roughly $2.45 a month. So that's what they presented. So they're pretty far. I mean, they're already at the dollars and cents. And I asked these questions at 2 weeks ago at the EDSWAC meeting, because my approach has been from the business standpoint. The county standpoint is mostly geared towards regulatory compliance. So I'm very keen on the targets and the dollars and things like that. So those are my 4 questions that I think if they can't be answered now, they need to be answered pretty quick.
Give Jeff a chance. So Jeff, the first one was the increase in diversion. Can you respond to that?
Unfortunately, this is something that I probably have to be working with staff on because they're more involved in the numbers on this one. But to go over what the program costs are, that's one of the components of getting our notice of intent to comply in prior or before March 1st. And by doing that, we're able to apply for the grants, which we already have, but we have to have that notice of intent to comply. And the city of South Lake Tahoe, the city of Placerville, and the county for unincorporated have all individually applied for grants. And I believe either Placerville is around 30,000, South Tahoe is in the 20,000s, and the counties will be about $220,000, which will go for the education and outreach. We have a sustainability coordinator that we hired last year. That was a long gone process too. And so that's part of that program implementation is to incorporate that funding with the grants that Cal Recycle has made available to all the jurisdictions.
Okay, so Don also asked about the cost per ton for diversion. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I know last time, I think, well, the last 2, the cost per ton and the proposed rate increase, those would be the numbers that Eldorado Disposal will be able to provide because they do that on a normal, their operating basis. So that would be a question that would be asked to them in their next presentation in March to the board, and then we could come back to your committee.
Okay. So, and Donna's right. We've been at this a long time, but the reality check usually the county is when you see an enforcement date pop up on the screen, and that's the get real time frame, right? All right, they're going to start enforcing these things. What is it we need to start putting in place? And that's why I think you're going to see, I guess it's an ordinance, if I'm not mistaken, come before the board as to how we're going to implement this at the county level. And then it'll work down through the various departments and agencies that have to support that from there. And I'm sure we're going to get budget requests because most of the time when you talk about grant money, it's for implementation, it's initial. But the thing the county always has to look at, well, when that money's dried up, what do we do to sustain these efforts? Because we know there's an ongoing activity. Enforcement isn't something that's one time and you're done, right? It's not once and done. You got an ongoing activity that has to be budgeted. It takes people to, staff people and other maybe contractors to do that work. So it adds to the total cost. I don't know any other way around it. So more to come on that, I think, as time goes on, but I would look forward, obviously, to the presentation we're planning here at the Community Council after the board's presentation to better understand what our waste disposal organization is looking at relative to their actual costs and implementation, and if there's any exceptions, et cetera, that they're looking at, and that gets into the containers and all the other stuff. So that's really for Waste Connections discussion to share with us. So that'll be forthcoming.
Could I ask one more?
Well, Ron first, and then we'll come back. So Ron, you had something?
I'm Ron Cassidy, Brian Canyon.
Get you the microphone, please. Yeah.
Thank you. There you go. Ron Cassidy, Bridlewood Canyon. Because there are very few places to process food waste, organic waste, do we have an idea where El Dorado County is going to be processing it?
I believe what Eldorado Disposal had mentioned that they are diverting some of the waste to Yolo County.
So they're hauling it out of the county.
That's one alternative if they can get a decent contract rate to do that.
Right. Is there a biodigester in the works for El Dorado County anywhere?
Not that I'm aware of, unless Jeff is aware of something.
Not yet, but that's one of the talks of the CEO's office, looking at the biogenerators. There's that, and I believe even at the MRF, they're looking at getting, biogenerators to go help kind of offset their costs too. So it's a plan in motion. Just as
wood products, I believe, disposal of excess forestry products, et cetera, slash.
Right.
So probably doesn't apply much to food products. I mean, it could, but I've heard that's a very expensive part of a bio waste facilities when you start basically burning waste materials, food waste and stuff. It's without the fuel generation part like wood has. And then you have to have scrubbers. So I mean, it's very costly, as I understand it today, to do that. Even more costly than it is just to reprocess wood products and generate electricity from that. So discussion will continue there, but I don't think there's any short-term proposals or solutions. And most of those things require federal money to subsidize it. Because sort of that, it may or may not happen. Anyway,
We had a biodigester in Sacramento that went out of business.
yeah. So there's a case in point, right? At one point, maybe the economics penciled, but at some point the costs are just prohibitive with transportation and labor and everything else increasing it the way they are. So it's under consideration, but I don't think there's any definitive plan. So good question. Any other comments from people present in the boardroom? Let's go very quickly. Anybody on Zoom with their hand up? And we'll come back to Richard.
No, I don't see.
Okay, Richard, back to you.
Two things. One, and this gentleman made a good point. This has been simmering since 2016, but reality check on all laws until it comes face to face with the people who have to implement it or be affected by it. There's no reality to it. And the second thing, I saw numbers relative to edible waste, etc. I'm not sure the entities out there that distribute food are prepared to be taking in, but basically are prepared meals, but not sold meals. The example of the caterer, etc. That's a whole different thing than what we see at Christmas and Thanksgiving, where canned and safe shelf life products are being boxed and given to people who have a need. I'm not sure there's an adequate distribution system at all to dispose of the good intention of sending prepared meals that were never served out into the public to be consumed during a period of time when it's safe. And so I think, once again, we have governance by sounding good, but not governance by practicality. And I think the consequences now are just being shoved to the Board of Supervisors in the county and said, handle it because the state capital is on something else right now.
Yeah, and I'm not gonna, and Jeff, do you have a response to prepared meals and stuff? I don't think that's a large part of the equation as opposed to food products that would go into food meal preparation that are still usable, that maybe the simple solution is you freeze it quickly, you hold it as in a freeze product. If you're talking about meat products or something, then it can be used as a meal source for somebody when you pull it out of the freezer and use it as part of a distributed product. And our food bank has the ability to do some of those things. Not sure how much investment they're going to get into this, but your thoughts, Jeff?
I don't think we're going to see a whole lot of the prepared meals, like I gave the example for a caterer. That's probably in a larger metropolitan area where you've got larger restaurants, larger venues. Up here, what we're going to be seeing probably is produce. That was probably the number one thing that would get thrown out. The tomato doesn't look as good, and so they're going to throw it out versus we can set that aside and send it to the food bank or send it to a nonprofit. There's another component out there for limited service charitable feeding operations too. And they can be the recipients of the raw products, and within the different tiers that they can fall into, they can actually take that food and create and prepare meals for people as well too. So that's one of the other options. Being up in the rural areas up here, that's probably what we're going to see is, again, like, canned goods or things that are, the expiration date's coming, but still good. But I think the main thing is going to be produce.
Yeah, good point. And that, a lot of it is the look of it, not necessarily the nutritional value of it, right? So it depends on how it's prepared and all those kinds of things. So yeah.
Right, and there's plenty of movies, and I believe the one that came out a few years ago from Anthony Bourdain was like Wasted, but it was a movie on different chefs around the world taking the remnants of food, of the vegetables, and actually creating meals of like what the celery stalks that no one wants to get to the end. But these chefs are being creative and using the parts that people normally throw away and creating new meals for it. So it's just the mindset that it doesn't look pretty, it's not going to sell, but it's still wholesome and good. And they turn it into something that's edible.
Very good. So any other final comments, questions for Jeff? Seeing none, I want to thank you again for a great presentation. You went to far more work than I expected. So no, this is very helpful. We can share it with all of our different outlets to try to get communication across the broader spectrum of El Dorado Hills and El Dorado County. But well done, Jeff. I thought it was very self-explanatory, a lot of good information. And I think a lot of people are going to be surprised at the undertaking that we're going to have to be faced with here in the very near term. So more to come. And again, my appreciation for all the good information you've been able to share with us. So
well, I'm glad I was able to help out and do a good presentation for everybody. And again, I'm just the messenger. I didn't make the laws up. It's the state.
and be careful what kind of shirt you buy. Don't buy any with targets on them, because that's what happens with messengers, as we know, right? They become targets, unfortunately. So
yeah, I'll just dress up in a brown suit and say I'm UPS. Everyone likes that.
there you go. Yeah. Or an Amazon Prime outfit or something, rather, delivering something somebody wants, right? So
No, because Amazon's raising the prices $20, so we're not going to go there on that one.
oh, okay. Sorry about that. Yeah. Well, that's inflation, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, enough said. Again, thank you, Jeff. And
You're welcome.
with that, we'll move on to Supervisor Communications. I just had three things very quickly. I did attend the annual El Dorado County Tourism Business Summit that was held out at the Holiday Inn Express. The biggest takeaway that I got from that was relative to rebuilding our tourism businesses, and a lot of good ideas as to how those businesses can attract consumers, the public, back to their establishments. The one big takeaway that I got was the fact that we lost 15% of our market share across the state of California. And I assume that applies equally to El Dorado County or more to the state of Florida. Because if you look at who stayed open and who closed down, there's been a lot of tourism that's been rediverted to Florida. That's a fact. We lost 15%. So part of that's trying to rebuild that market share and determine how much will come back to California. But I think it's a prime example of how political decisions affect our commerce, affect our ability for our businesses to survive, all of those things. And I'm not sure they're given full consideration at times when those decisions are made, but that's just a statement of fact. So enough on that one. I did want to also advise everybody that the proposed grocery outlet at Green Valley Station, that is moving forward. The Planning Commission heard the discussion. They approved it. It came back to the Board of Supervisors on appeal. The Board of Supervisors, I think with the exception of one, it was a 4-1 vote, approved it. So now there will be movement, I'm assuming, for the grocery outlet to take out permits and to build a new facility. And that's just on the other side of our district off of Green Valley Road as you go towards Cameron Park. I'm trying to remember the name of the intersection road there. Do you remember, John?
It's Green Valley and Cameron Park Drive. Hastings is on the north side.
Right past the Starbucks, the old
Right.
Sears.
The old Steers outlet.
Lawn
Yeah,
on the
right.
right-hand side. It's a phase project. So the first phase is the first part you come to, half of that.
Right. So those of you who travel up and down Green Valley Road, you'll notice some construction there. And I happen to be a shopper at a grocery outlet. I think they offer things that occasionally are really easy to drop in and purchase. And that's part of our community outside of El Dorado Hills, I think, is in need of some kind of grocery service like that. So it fits a need. And that's the important part. It's not just another grocery store across the street from a grocery store. It fits a local need. So I think that's the bigger picture part of it. The last thing is the Board of Supervisors had a proposal from the sheriff to lease property for a Cameron Park Sheriff Substation up in the Safeway Center. That again was approved, so we're moving forward with that. So that would give us the Placerville Station, the Tahoe Station, the El Dorado Hills Substation, which is mostly operated by our STARS volunteers, and now a Cameron Park Substation that will be mostly operated by STARS volunteers. They have other things going on. So that, I think, is an encouraging sight, because evidently the crime rates up there have been increasing. And if having a substation present in the community, like in El Dorado Hills Business Park, if that helps curb crime in that local area, it may be well worth the investment. So we're gonna try that to see if that helps that situation and get reports back on what kind of statistics, if there has been a reduction in net crime. My biggest concern is it addresses a local area, but does it really serve the greater aspect of the community's crime rates? For instance, I know there's a lot of stuff that happens in the Safeway Shopping Center off of Green Valley Road that I'm not sure having a substation in El Dorado Hills has ever affected any change on. So overall, I think it helps. I'm not sure it helps the whole community, but we'll try it.
It's a little more compressed.
It is.
Dorado Hills, so.
It is, but what I see when I read the crime reports is the largest number of calls are related to the apartment complexes and things going on there that are pretty far removed for the most part from that Safeway Shopping Center. So
Do we have stats in the town center where the substation was put in to say that the crime rates have been dropping? Or do we have anything along
when
those
I went
lines?
in our substation and asked for those statistics, I was told I could find them on the sheriff's website. And when the sheriff's website, I couldn't find anything. So I'm not aware of any publicly posted statistics on that.
That'd be a good question to ask whenever we have the sheriff on.
Yeah, yeah.
And I review the sheriff's monthly, and I can tell you that the number of calls going because of the new apartment complex and the increased activity around the theater and the restaurants and the Target parking lot seems to be populating the sheriff's logs much more frequently than ever in the past. So
Because that's exactly where the substation is.
you're exactly right. You're having car burglaries. You're having things that are listed as grand theft, and I have no idea what that might constitute because the details are never there. But I can't think of the name of the apartment complex. Element
79.
Right.
Bingo. Many of the calls are related to that facility. So
Interesting. I had not heard any of that. I've not heard that reported in any of our meetings. So that's an interesting look at things. So but anyway, I just wanted
That's
to,
Town center apartments,
Yeah.
is that what they call it?
yeah. Element 79.
It's typically in the Village Life.
I read it there, but when we hear our crime statistics, I've not,
numbers that we like that right out of the sheriff's.
but I've not heard that there's a concentrated increase in crime in those areas. I mean, you have to kind of collect that data.
Those are the reported, that's the source of the calls coming in or the responses. Yeah.
Okay.
Sounds like a lot of Kelly murders.
There were a couple, catalytic converters, a couple at Element 79. But
Okay.
somebody got in the garage and broke in. So there was a bunch like within a 1 week period and then kind of up and down after that.
So the fire department got involved with that, Chief Johnson, is that correct? Nope, all right. I was thinking about inspections and stuff because you're not supposed to have those kinds of things in garages, but you can't really inspect for everything either. So, okay.
On the car.
Oh, okay, I'm thinking of catalytic heaters.
No.
Oh, okay, so, all right, got it. Automobiles, thank you. So that's all I had for Supervisor Communications. Let's move to our leadership team progress reports. We always start with public safety. Do we have anyone representing our sheriff this evening?
No.
Okay. Do we have anyone representing the CHP? Officer Brown or anybody else? Okay, Chief Johnson, you're up.
I'm on.
You have a microphone?
I
You
do. I
Great,
do.
Very good.
Chief Johnson, El Dorado Hills Fire Department Fire Chief. Been a pretty tough week. Last week for the fire service, we lost a Stockton firefighter due to a on-duty shooting, and subsequently he passed from his injuries. That very same day, we got report that one of our retired captains here at El Dorado Hills passed away due to COVID. And so it's just been a really, really tough week. And obviously that's on the heels of the Elk Grove officer being hit by the car and killed. So definitely lots of tragedy. We've got lots of COVID related things that are happening here in the department. We thought we were peaked and we're going down, but there's been just a lot of close contacts and a lot of COVID that's been going around. Most of it, thankfully, has been, it seems like the Omicron variant has been very light, but some of our folks have been hit pretty hard. So other than that, the funeral is tomorrow morning. We've got several folks going down there for that. We've got Chief Lilienthal down there helping with the planning. I know a lot of the fire agencies throughout the entire region, Sac Metro, Sac City, and some of the others, they actually sent engines down to cover and run the calls so the Stockton firefighters can grieve. So definitely a big fire service effort down there. Tomorrow is the funeral. End of report.
Thank you for that. I'll just piggyback on that to mention that Janine DeAugustini is heading up an event that's called Back the Badge. And Chief Johnson has been helpful in distributing that information, but it's a rustic gala honoring our hometown heroes, which is anybody that wears a badge. So it's our first responder firefighters, it's our public safety officers, sheriffs, police, anybody. And the date is March 12th, 2022. It's at the El Dorado County Fairgrounds. Tickets are available. I don't know if we put this out. We were going to find out if Carla was going to distribute it or not, right?
I asked, yeah, but I can ask.
Okay,
on the minutes.
So we'll put the information on. I plan on attending. I purchased a table and stuff, so we're going to be there to represent El Dorado Hills as a minimum, because I think this is something we all need to back our law enforcement and anyone that wears a badge, from the standpoint, we know firefighters have been attacked and basically murdered, responding to a scene and stuff. And so it's not limited to police or sheriff's officers. It's anybody that wears a uniform carrying a badge anymore. So it is a matter of concern, but I think in particular because of Tyler Lenahan's association with El Dorado Hills, and it turns out one of my daughters went to school with him here. I think he was an Oak Ridge High School grad. If he wasn't, he at least attended Oak Ridge High School, the same class that my middle daughter was in. So there's a lot of personal impact about those kinds of things when you recognize it was somebody who grew up in our community and was serving the public, and unfortunately was in the wrong place at the wrong time. I don't know how else to explain it. So, but our sympathies go out to his family, and this is just another way to show our appreciation. And so we'll distribute that information and people can respond accordingly. So great event. And Janine D'Agostini has always been backing these kinds of things for at least the last 5 or 6 years that I'm aware of various programs. So as much as we can support her, I think it's the right thing to do.
So Andrew Brown's checking in. Sam?
Oh,
There he is, yeah.
Officer Brown, you there?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, you're coming through fine.
Excellent. All right, so I don't know what was going on. Same issue as last month with me jumping in. For our report, I was able to get some statistics very similar to kind of what the sheriff does. We in D1 we conducted 11 arrests during the month of January, investigated 12 crashes. 2 of those 11 arrests were DUI, one of which was drugs. The other was alcohol. And then also I'd like to just touch on that we've been getting quite a few complaints from parents and administration of schools along the highways and byways in El Dorado Hills for traffic behavior at schools, crosswalks, stop signs, and the like. We're aggressively going after that. We're engaging our shifts for enforcement as well as our senior volunteers. Just be that presence to remind people to behave when they're out there driving around our kids, and poor behavior is not going to be tolerated. We're issuing quite a few citations for disobeying crossing guards, disobeying and failing to yield for pedestrians in crosswalks, which we just had one of those last week. There at El Dorado Hills Boulevard transition to Serrano Parkway. We had a pedestrian get hit. So we're aggressively going after that. The tickets are some of the most expensive tickets you can imagine. And so we want to encourage people to please obey those crossing guards, yield for pedestrians, and just please pay attention to those 25-mile-an-hour signs, especially when kids are out there. And it all comes down to courtesy and planning ahead and making sure that you have enough time to get to where you're going, understanding that Serrano Parkway at Silva Valley Parkway in Harvard around 8 o'clock in the morning, you can always expect that somebody, school is going to be dropping off during that time. So please plan ahead and plan accordingly and be patient. But I can open it up to any inquiries or questions that anyone may have.
Thank you, Andrew. So one question I had, I know we were pursuing monies to get a motorcycle officer local to the Placer office and stuff. Do you know if we were successful with that, or is that still a work in progress? Or
Commander Hatfield had touched on that this last week. It's still a work in progress. We're making
Okay.
sure we get all our T's crossed and lowercase j's dotted, and we'll be submitting that up to the chains shortly, but it hasn't been submitted beyond us yet. But informal
Okay,
conversations
very
have taken.
Yeah, because I think that would be a fantastic addition, because a lot of people have known to look for CHP cars, et cetera, but a motorcycle officer is awful tough to see at times. And it just seems like when you start citing one person, everybody else recognizes what's going on. So there is a ripple effect of that can be very helpful in terms of people getting a wake-up call from people who just don't seem to get the message any other way. So anyway, that would be my comment to that. So leadership council members, anybody questions or comments for Andrew, Officer Brown? Seeing none. Anyone here in the conference room have any questions for Officer Brown? Anyone on Zoom? All right. Well, thanks again, Andrew, for your participation.
I gotta finish it with the recruiting pitch. It's almost always asked, when can we get more CHP officers up here? And I agree.
Yep.
And it just comes from a recruiting effort and a graduation effort. We just had 142 brand new officers graduate our academy this last week. Pretty much everything I do has to encompass a recruiting effort. So for those who are in the audience who have people that are in recruiting age, or you might be that one yourself, if pay is what you want, we have very competitive pay. If working in San Diego is what you want, you can work in San Diego. And if working in Placerville is what you want, you can work in Placerville. So it's just one of those things that I got to push. We're recruiting our next generation. We have a push for the next 2 years. Our commissioner is set a goal for hiring 1,000 new officers throughout the state of California. So that includes here. So we must push recruiting in every way, shape, and form. And if you need to know more about what we do and what we bring home on a monthly basis in our paycheck, you can go to chpmadeformore.com, and you can find out a lot more there.
Thank you for that, because I know every public safety agency seems to be recruiting right now, whether it's CHP, it's police, it's sheriffs, it's fire station, firefighters. The whole public safety area seems to be lacking in people wanting to get into that profession. And obviously the national news will tell you why some of that's happening. But no, I appreciate the numbers. 140 new academy grads, that's impressive. Obviously, I'm not sure that's one of the larger graduating classes, but it's still a pretty impressive number. So
it's very impressive it's real impressive for where it's been the past 5 years. So we're doing well.
Excellent. Well, again, thank you for your participation and providing the information. With that, let's go to economic development. Glenn.
Okay, turn my microphone on. I do have some notes here, some updates from last month. Everybody's always curious about Costco. No update or no changes. They're still working on their initial EIR, and I guess that's progressing, but there's no update. So the Aloft Hotel, the permit again was issued. They think maybe within a couple months they'll be breaking ground. And lots of inquiries still going on about the business park for some new potential tenants that may come in there. And let's see, the Town and Country, that's gone by a couple of different names. Is that the current name now?
Country Village.
Okay, the village, yes. And so I guess they've submitted an initial plan. Is that where they're at?
They submitted, we had them last month at APAC. So yeah, they presented.
So they submitted a formal application to the planning department. That process started. So yep.
So they are definitely moving forward.
And I'll just mention they made substantial changes from what they originally presented.
Significantly smaller.
In their conceptual presentation to the board. So yeah. And they're talking about phases and stuff now. So it seems like it's more achievable from what they're proposing. But I think it's a very interesting project. We'll see where it goes.
Good. A couple of other things I've been asked to share. The Board of Supervisors tomorrow, Tri-Square Construction, maybe Supervisor Heidel, you can tell us a little bit more. They're getting some funding reimbursement from TOT for bringing, I guess, expanding and bringing jobs to the county. That'll result in increased tax base.
Through our TOT incentives. That's
right.
correct. That got processed through Kyle Zimbelman. And I think it's the first time we've been able to reimburse an employer that's met that criteria. So it's a very difficult thing to meet the criteria for reimbursement as the county set up the incentive policy, but this is the first one. So I'm hoping it's not the last one, because I think those kinds of things are helpful to recognize that the county wants to encourage the right kind of businesses to do the right things and bring services to the whole county, if not El Dorado Hills in particular. So
Right, some leadership.
extremely favorable, and like I said, it's the first one according to Kyle. So
Okay, and Kyle Zimmelman as well asked me to talk about the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021 that's available for nonprofits for COVID-19 economic impact grants.
Yep.
And that's available through the Economic Development Division at the county.
Yep.
And that's where Kyle Zimmelman is responsible. So there's definitely things going on in economic development. There's things going on in the county. As far as CDAC, we're kicking off this week is our monthly meeting, and we're kicking off our new year looking at the scope of work that CDAC is going to be involved in. And as always, it's a public meeting, 1 to 4 on Thursday.
very good. Thank you. Any questions or comments for Glenn from anybody in the leadership team or anybody present here? Yeah, Don.
I just have one question, that kind of dovetails with what Ron was asking about processing organic waste or what have you here. I look on the county website, on the Legistar, on your meeting minutes, and I've seen a couple of the meeting minutes, but I haven't been able to really track through it. You talk about you're working on some sort of organic recycling, some with the new Pioneer Energy, and some it seems like it's outside of it. Could you just maybe give an idea of what it is that you're covering?
Sure. As far as there is not anything that we've looked at as CDAC as far as working with Pioneer for like biomass or regeneration, but there was a subcommittee that's been around now for, I guess, about 1.5 years, and they were looking at wood products, down trees, things like that are in the forest and relating to the Caldor fire. But there's I guess there's a staff committee right now working on that, and so CDAC was asked to kind of put ours aside, being that the county staff is already working on that. So there was some initial investigation from it, but we do not officially have any involvement currently relating to that.
I'll just mention that the county recruited or brought back Greg Stanton as a retired annuitant to take a look in particular the biomass situation and make recommendations as what can be done across El Dorado County or maybe in collaboration with another county. So we're still waiting to hear the report that would come back to the Board of Supervisors on that. But having selected somebody to kind of take the lead in that area, I was determined that probably the best thing for CDAC to do is go into a monitor mode, watch and wait and see what happens if there's anything that they can help bring forward as a recommendation to the board, because I think we're going to get it directly off of the temporary employee type situation we brought Greg in. Greg's got a huge background in this. He was the former director of environmental management, so he understands all those things and was able to step right into that role and start doing some analysis. And I'm sure we'll get the results of that soon. So
right, and there's plenty of other projects that CDAC can also work with other agencies and departments.
There isn't really an easy way. If I want to go and go to the page that would have all the documentation, the documents and studies that you've done on that topic, it's very hard on the legislature to really find something. It kind of meets the Brown Act requirement of checking the box and saying this is what we're going to talk about, and then say we talk about it.
If there were any, it would be there, but there wasn't. The committee never got that far.
right, very good. Any other comments or questions for Glenn? Let's go to infrastructure, and Aloft Hotel was kind of mentioned. Do you want to add anything there, John, and anything else relevant?
Yeah, I went by there this morning and
Yeah.
they've broken ground, permits have been issued, and so it's happening now. So they're digging the footings for the foundation, so they're off and running. And for anyone who wonders, they're on the north end of the northern parking lot for the movie theaters. So it's right next door. So they're off and running. So I just wanted to say personally, I was fortunate to be held up in traffic last Tuesday with the funeral procession for the Elk Grove officer. And then in the afternoon, my wife and I drove down there and wanted to honor them on the way back up the hill. So we were fortunate to be able to, in a small way, honor his service, and apparently lives in Rescue.
Tyler Lenahan by name, so yes.
Yeah, and so, and I wish I could participate in Back the Badge, but I've got a long planned trip to Kauai. So I'll just give privately my thanks and praise to all of our officers and stuff. And so, I wish I could be here for that. So, and then the last thing is Central El Dorado Hills. Anyone heard about that project? Been having some discussions with our planning managers, and it looks like we're going to cross the finish line in March or April and be able to finally deliberate and move on. So wish I had something more definitive. But speaking of vacations, I have the early part of April a long-standing vacation that I can't change as well. So I'm trying to work with Rob Peters to around that as best I can. So stay tuned. So we're working on that. So that's all I got.
All right, very good. Any questions for John? Seeing none from no one who's participating here, and tell me if somebody raises their hand, so
No.
I don't have to ask every time. That would be helpful. So, okay, so let's go to good governance. Richard, I saw your question, so
Yeah.
wherever you want to start.
I just threw out some questions because John announced that regular public meetings will be starting at the POS tomorrow.
Yes.
And I'm asking with an assessment as to, have we learned anything during this period of oddity in terms of meetings that may affect how these meetings go forward in the future? Has there been more or different kind of public participation through the Zoom process and or the subsequent review of minutes on the website? And I asked that kind of maybe as a question to offer to John to speculate what might be happening. And then I asked the question, has the county considered any more means of putting out to the public what is going on in county government at the Board of Supervisors meetings? Because if you read the agenda, if you go through the county website and look at and find the agenda through the website and everything else, and then you get the legalese of the county government meeting all its requirements. But I mean, wow, that's paint dry watching kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But is there any effort maybe to get Village Life or the Mountain Democrat to talk about the agenda that's coming up, so people at least say, oh, that's going to be a discussion thing or what have you? Not everything on there is really meat and potatoes, that's for sure. But maybe certain items should have an advanced presentation. Take it.
Okay, so in response to your first question, there has been a lot of changes since we went to the Zoom meetings. My perspective is I think most people would prefer to have board meetings where they can come to the board chambers and interact with the board and staff, and hopefully we'll get to that. This initial meeting tomorrow, as I understand it, will be very limited staff there because we've had a lot of cases of COVID that have erupted in various parts of our organization, and that means people have to quarantine for an extended period of time. So my understanding is, with the exception of probably David Livingston, Don Ashton, and Kim Dawson, we probably won't have other staff in the meeting, but we will have the public. So that's a step in the right direction. When we get past this current Omicron thing, I think staff will feel more comfortable in coming to the board meetings and interacting with the public, et cetera, as they have in the past. So yes, the difficulty of having to participate remotely has caused a lot of people to transition. But by the same token, I think a hybrid meeting is going to be our way forward, because there's a lot of people that have said, you know, I can't come to every one of your meetings, but I'd like to understand what's going on. So from that perspective, that Zoom connectivity and allowing the public to comment via Zoom is a big help to them to be able to be remote and to make a comment to the board if they haven't already submitted a letter, even if they have submitted a letter. So I think that's helped the overall communication. but there is no one answer. It isn't all Zoom and it isn't all in the board chambers. I think it's that combination of, if you want to come to the board chambers, you're welcome. That's probably the most effective way to communicate things, because we do have technical difficulties with Zoom, and sometimes, you know, the communication, quality of the communication is disrupted by connectivity and other things. So it's always better to do it in person in my mind, but it has been very helpful. The thing that we hear probably most often is the desire to go back to a open forum comment that isn't at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, at sometime in the morning. So I know that's been a continuing discussion. There's pluses and minuses on that. The difficulty for the board is that the board meeting is for the board to conduct the people's business. And we have to get that business conducted. Otherwise it carries over and accumulates and stuff. So if we get off to a good start and get some of that business conducted, we've got that behind us. If we start with public forum and it keeps expanding and expanding and expanding, at some point, it's a method of just delaying activity. I mean, indirectly, that's what happens. I don't know that it's anything anybody is trying to do, but if we can conduct some portion of our central business in the morning and then go to the open forum in the afternoon, it's a better way for us to get our work done within a reasonable time frame. So that's always the balancing point. I personally think that, you know, the public should be able to participate when they think it's easiest for them to participate, but by the same token, the board has their work to do. So I don't see it changing, but that's probably the biggest response we've gotten from some of the things we did with the COVID and response and using Zoom and other things. We did change that open forum timing. So that's probably had the most responses of anything. But the biggest issue we hear over and over again, obviously, is COVID and what the county is doing and what our public health officer is doing and what's happening at the schools. And so I don't see that changing at all. That comment will still be there. It's just how much comment we get on it, because I think a lot of people have come to the realization that the county really doesn't have any direct control on those as a board of supervisors. Certainly our public health officer makes recommendations, but it really goes to schools. It goes to the school districts individually, and it goes to the Office of Education above that. And ultimately it's tied to the California Department of Public Health and the governor. So we can have our opinions, but that doesn't change what happens at the school district level. So that's part of the ongoing discussion, that it's very difficult to try to help people understand that. So that's part of it. With respect to your second question, the board, to my knowledge, has not had any discussions on trying to broadening the distribution. What we found is that most people, even though the information is readily available on the Register, all we have to do is click the item and look at the staff report, the extended text, and all the attachments. Most people don't do that. They want to read one line and get everything that's involved with that. Well, we can't have one line. There's way too much depth of information involved with trying to do that. So a lot of people will make comment on that they don't understand this, or they read something in social media that's totally opposite to what's in the Register file, if you just, you know, get to that point and read it. So we've had enough difficulty in trying to communicate how to find things in Register. I'm not sure at this point we would want to move out and approach, you know, another agency to distribute information, because it's so important that people get accurate information and not information that's been interpreted by somebody. And that's very difficult to do. So Cindy may have some thoughts on that as well, but to my knowledge, the board has never had that discussion. Transparency is something we're all trying to accomplish. Ultimately, what I'm pushing for is a tool that's better than Register, that makes it a little easier for people to understand how to get to that information, and a search engine that makes it much simpler than when you go in and enter some keywords, you get to the information you're looking for. Because my experience has been that search engine isn't real good to look for things that are historical. You gotta almost know what the Register number is and have that tracked down somewhere to be able to get back to that document. It's just extremely difficult to pull in from historical information primarily from it with any short time. And it takes a lot of work to try to find some of that stuff. So we're working to try to improve the overall tool. I've been an advocate of several other tools that are out there. I'm not going to go into that, but I think Register is an outdated tool. It serves the needs we have right now, but it's not the best software available to do that communication, in my opinion. So we've asked IT to take a look at some of the other software sets that are out there, that would they be better suited and still meet the requirements we have for documentation and collecting public input and all those things? And that's a pretty broad set of requests, but there are tools that do that. And I've had private sector experience with some of them that I thought were quite good, but never in the application of government. So there may be differences there in terms of how you track some of this. I'm sure John's had experience with some of that too.
Yeah, well, I've built document management systems from scratch because my employer didn't want to pay for them.
Right.
So, I mean, building servers, building architecture systems, all that. So it's never fun. And by the time you're done building it, use it for a few years, it's antiquated already. And I would agree with Legistar. It's tough to find. You know, every week I'll get the notes about the planning commission. You know, the email will come out, planning commission, you know, here it's in Legistar, go and find the documents and anything that's in for the board. And for APAC, we share that on the APAC website. And, but I'm weird because I go through and I look for El Dorado Hills and, you know, we post it there as long as it's related to development or a project, transportation. And then that's on the APAC website because we just feel for people, they're tracking with APAC, it's easier for them to see it there than to go searching through Legistar. So we do include the Legistar table and the link for any project. We typically don't share the actual documents unless it's a project document we're reviewing and we put it in its own project silo. But yeah, it's hard. It's simple to go through. And then there are things that are maddening, like I want to say for Central, as an example, when you go through and you know that you can go through and see the public comments that were submitted or documents that have been attached. But then when the public hearing is closed, there's times where all those documents go away until the next public hearing is scheduled and it's not ready. It's not available on Legistar again for a week to 2 weeks before. The planning commission is about 2 weeks. The board's about a week, typically for public, for us to see it. So it's tough. And again, like I said, I'm sick in the head and I read those things all week long. So so I'm used to seeing it. But if you know, I go and tell my neighbor something, they go, what? Where? They don't know. So yeah, the visibility, that 1 week notice, especially for the board, that's tough to have, like sort of that advanced knowledge. You almost have to know. And if it's a historical thing, as John mentioned, you have to know, well, what was the Legistar file? Well, if you can get to any part of it, typically there's a link to other previous Legistar files that attach to it, but you have to know what you're looking for. It's not easy.
Sometimes it's approximate time frame because you use a keyword, and I think the keyword should trigger stuff like most search engines. Doesn't happen. Then when you actually find the document, that keyword's in there, but somehow search engine didn't pick up that keyword, which, you know, to me is the connectivity of subject matter with a given document. So
even going through track it is hard.
yes,
If you look for a historical document for like a tentative map from 2007, you'd think, well, it's someplace in 2007. Well, no, it was proposed in 2007. It probably didn't, you know, meet all its legislative milestones until 2008 or 2010. So the actual dates you're looking for are years away from what the label is, you know, TM07 or whatever. So yeah, it's a minefield.
I have a vision of what the ultimate solution is. You may not like it, but a software set that's basically audible response. You call a number and you ask a question, I'd like to find the report for such and such, and you can do a search and say the report's available here. What email should I send it to? And that stuff becomes automated. I think that's within our ability to do. I don't know what the costs are, but that kind of response where you're not taking staff time to go dig for something, but yet you get the answer you're looking for would be ideal. Now, is that achievable? I think it is, but is the technology there today? Maybe, but I'm sure it's expensive. But I think ultimately, because frequently asked questions, it's the same kind of thing. But if you can ask an audible question that's understandable and get a response from a robot, basically, that's looked it up and said, tell me the email address to send this to, and it's on its way. Now you've got connectivity that makes it much more transparent. Maybe I'm a dreamer, but to me, ultimately, that takes staff time out of it, but it provides the transparency most people are looking for.
Maybe it could be a topic for a future meeting. We could talk
Strategic planning, yes.
Yeah, maybe in the future.
Right.
Staff is very responsive though. I mean, if you go to staff and look for something, if they're not going to find it immediately, they will get back to you, but it's legwork, just like you and I would do.
And it takes away from the other duties they're trying to fulfill. So we've got a lot of things that are backlogged because of COVID, and then having to respond, I shouldn't say having, but taking the time to respond to public input, which is part of their job, takes away from the other things that's stacked up on their plate to do. So if you can automate that with accurate information, to me, that's the ultimate solution. So, but there's probably a way to hack that and destroy that too. So as soon as you invent something that seems to be a solution set, somebody's got a way to defeat it, right? As we've seen with a lot of social media things that have happened. So I'll leave it at that, but good questions.
Thank you.
So let's move on to healthy communities. Angie, I guess.
Wendy May has her hand up.
Okay, okay.
Well, just speaking to what John said, you're not a dreamer, sir, but getting through to our permits and building department has not been easy. But yes, it is primarily due to COVID. There's more signs, I'm sorry to say, that display when our department is not available more than there are signs saying them when they are. And the last time I was there to help a client, I took pictures of those signs and I sat for an hour and a half and then placed 4 emails to our permits department with a response that said they would get back to me. And I've been waiting for 7 weeks. And I reached out to John to help me with that. So I'm sorry, these are things that you may not know about, but it's not easy. And they're not automated requests or responses. It's not something you can say, I just need this with a 10-word response or question or need. It's not like that. So I apologize, but I did have to chime in.
I appreciate that, because that's been one of the big struggles, is trying to figure out how we keep those offices staffed with people that can keep up to date with what's going on and meet with the public. And the answer is, it hasn't been an easily accomplished. In fact, it's been extremely difficult and unsatisfactory to most of us, but I don't know how you get around that, given sometimes staff just has to be at home. I mean, they've been quarantined, or they're very fearful of going into the workplace. And so the best answer is, let's get beyond this COVID stuff and normalize and get things back to a more stable condition, because we also have had staffing shortages in a number of departments, and the recruitment has been very difficult in those departments. So, and I hear that from all government agencies, whether it's a county or city, they're having difficulty staffing key positions. So like our law enforcement, like our public safety, they're having the same kind of difficulties getting the right kind of staff, maybe with the exception of the CHP Academy. But no, I appreciate your comments, Wendy May, and all I can say is we're doing our best, but I'm not satisfied we're getting there yet, but hopefully we will. So, okay, so moving on then to healthy communities. And we brought Angie in recently. We are planning on having a second mental health forum. We're talking about probably the middle of March type of time frame. I don't know if we found out the calendar of dates available yet, but we plan on having it here in the fire department conference room. So we're trying to work on the dates that are compatible with all of our guest speakers, and we'll be putting that notice out as soon as we get the date defined. But we're going to be inviting several guest speakers. So it'll be the same type of lead-in panelists with their perspectives, and then 2 major areas of guest speakers, one of which will be Marshall Hospital, Marshall Medical, Marshall Foundation, whatever you want to call it. And we have 2 guest speakers who've been identified there, both Sari Nelson as the CEO, and then also Dr. Martin Entwistle, who was very involved with our project Room Key operations up in Pollock Pines, and has been very influential in helping distribute information and be informative relative to mental health situations and other things. So those are the 2 guest speakers from Marshall. And then we have a guest speaker from NAMI that will also be presenting. So Diane Ravenstein, Rabinowitz, thank you, Rabinowitz, will be commenting hopefully on the NAMI stuff. She's already taken to task putting together some charts and stuff, and then some other presentations. But again, it's to try to inform people and ultimately educate people about where we are with the mental health issues in El Dorado County and El Dorado Hills, because they've seen it in our schools, we've seen it in public places, our law enforcement is seeing it, I think we're seeing it in our jail systems. There's a lot of mental health issues that have escalated due to COVID primarily, or at least during the COVID period. And so we're trying to figure out, how do we get people more aware of what services are available, and then encourage them to help direct people that they know, whether it's a family member, a loved one, a friend, whatever, who you sense is in the need of some kind of mental health support, to get them connected with the right kind of people, whether they be clinicians or whomever, maybe it's a doctor, but get that going. So NAMI has had a lot of history in doing those things. Marshall has had a lot of history in doing those things. And so that would be our second forum, and we'd look for probably a third forum to include our El Dorado County Community Health Center, as they're building a new facility, as some of you may be aware, up on Missouri Flat Road. And so we thought, when and if we get to the third forum, then it would be another great guest speaker. So we're getting all of that together. We've got a draft agenda we're circulating and trying to finalize. And as soon as all of that coordination is done, we'll release that to the public, put things out on social media and make everybody aware of it. But that's what Angie's latest engagement is to help us with that process. And she will have time to make her comments during that meeting. So look forward to hearing what those are. And any questions or comments on that? All right, then let's move on to APAC, the February 9th meeting coming up.
2 days. We'll be back here in this room, 6:30 p.m., a new start time for us this year. We're trying to get people back to their lives in a more reasonable hour. But it's reasonable, just more reasonable. We primarily have 2 topics at the meeting on Wednesday. We have a guest speaker, it's Rafael Martinez, Director of Transportation Department for the El Dorado County, and we'll have a discussion about future transportation projects in El Dorado Hills, primarily focused on Latrobe and south of 50. What some possible improvements will be for like White Rock Road, Latrobe Road, Carson Crossing, and then maybe a little bit of a talk about a conceptual beltway connector in the area that would surround the El Dorado Hills Business Park, get people off of Latrobe and White Rock and get them around. And Rafael will be virtual, so we'll have him here for that. And then the other topic we have is sort of an interesting thing. It's a conceptual project local residents working on. Chris Dorado, I can never say his name right, I'm sorry, Chris. It's Inland Surf Company, and he's been working on a surf park in El Dorado Hills. And he's identified several properties he's interested in. He's been doing this for about a year, working with different, he's talked to EID. They don't seem to have a problem with water for his project. They were very entertained by the idea of it. I know he's talked to the CSD for several months, and he's got investors that maybe are looking at doing it privately instead of in conjunction with the CSD. But you know, he's a retired athlete, and he has a lot of interest in this project. There's a lot of dynamic things with it that, you know, will be a draw for El Dorado Hills. It will also be, he sees it as being really a feature for residents, but also has a draw from outside the area. So we'll be talking about that conceptual project, and he hopes that getting feedback from anybody who's in attendance that can make it a better project and move it along. So we'd see that soon. So again, we'll be back here in this building at 6:30. You could do it on Zoom, or you can do it live here in person.
Very good. So you get a night off, and then you're supposed to be back Wednesday, right?
Or we could just stay.
I think I'll go home.
They have sleeping quarters here. So.
They do. Most of those are occupied already.
Yes.
Other than that. Okay, and I think that we do have one left, and that is our information and outreach.
Yes, I guess due to COVID, there still aren't a lot of things happening yet. But on the 12th, the El Dorado CSD is having a Mommy and Me dance. You can go on their website and sign up for it. But moms and their kids can have it, having a dance at 7 o'clock. And also on Valentine's Day, there's going to be the horse-drawn carriage from 4 to 7. You need to sign up for those as well, but they're going to have the carriages there just for Valentine's Day. And all of there are links to all of these events are on the supervisor's webpage.
Is that the CSD, the horse charity?
No, no, it's with through Town Center. And they, I should have written down who the money's going to for charity.
The fundraiser, yeah. Okay, any questions for Cindy?
Oh, well, it's in March. You
What
can
are the
bring it up in
comments?
March. There's an event the CSD is doing at Bass Lake Park, the Walk with Austin. It's going to be a fundraiser for an All Abilities Park elements, but that'll be in March. It's actually later in March, so I'm sure we'll have that at the beginning of it.
In the March. And then also hear rumors that the The fireworks is coming back to town center. For
Did that permit move
4th of
forward?
July. I should know this week. Yeah,
Okay.
they're working with fire.
Okay, because that has come to board supervisors for approval,
Mhm.
right? Okay, so it's in work, okay. Because there seemed to be some confusion about that we had to try to straighten out too. and
Yes.
Hopefully that's been done, so.
Yeah, but we're supposed to know if it's gonna be from the water or another location. Should know this week and have all the information.
So another great thing to look forward to, bringing fireworks
Yay.
back to El Dorado Hills, right? And having a 4th of July celebration.
Yes, it's been a couple years.
Yes, it has. And they've been tough years, so.
Well, last year we just burned the whole county, so.
But not due to fireworks, presumably due to some, some shooting event that occurred that we'll see where that goes, right? That's under prosecution. So we'll see what the newspapers or somebody else reveals relative to how that all worked out, but for another day. So with that, I'm going to move to just a summary of our council member items. First of all, is there any go backs by anybody? Anything that we should have covered and didn't? All right, seeing none. I'll just note that our next meeting is Monday, March the 7th, back here. Frank Porter, who's an El Dorado Hills resident, is agreed to be our guest speaker. He's also, I think it's vice chair of Housing El Dorado. And they have two major activities going on. One is their support of the Placerville Winter Homeless Shelter, which a lot of that is being done by, I think it's 4 churches now, but the other 3, and each church is doing one night. But then the other 3 nights are being picked up in the city of Placerville, and they're actually using the old district attorney's annex, which the county made a sale to the city of Placerville for that use, not the DA's office and the annex. And they also made a deal to another organization for historical, but it was county-owned property. We wanted to move it off of our inventory list because the county wasn't going to do anything with it. It was just going to sit there and deteriorate. So we made 2 very reasonable, I think, sales in terms of not asking for a lot of money to get those in the hands of other people who will do something with it. So it's encouraging to see that annex is being used for that particular purpose. And the Board of Supervisors approved, I think it was like $128,000 worth of funding to help pay for the cost of running that additional facility through the end of, I think it's March, which is our winter housing, winter sheltering timeline. So Frank will be able to give us a lot more information on that, but hopefully we'll get a view of not only that, but also the affordable housing efforts going on by Housing El Dorado to find places and find opportunities to change county regulations, state law, whatever it may be, to try to allow more affordable housing within El Dorado County. So that's their activity. It's a separate nonprofit, or 501c3. So, and they've also been very involved with working with our El Dorado Opportunity Knox Continuum of Care. So a lot of activities relative to housing, whether it be for homeless or other needs. So it'll be interesting to hear what Frank's update is for us and get everybody in tune with that. So with that, I am going to adjourn tonight's meeting, and I'm glad I'm not looking at that clock over there in terms of the timing, because I'd be saying, oh my gosh, where'd the time go? So we'll adjourn at 6:52. We got in under 2 hours. So again, thank you for your participation.
Right, yeah,
And cooperation, huh?
that is right.
Clock is right.
It's 6:52.
Okay.
But we're not being picky.
It's the glare on it, I guess, because I'm not able to see the one arm because the light's there. So that's what it was. When I move, I can see it. So thank you all for attending, and look forward to seeing you back here next month. Thank you.
They're always on.